This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
British PM Boris Johnson hosts global virtual summit and calls for increased vaccine funding. Over 160,000 coronavirus infections confirmed across Africa. And Africa CDC pledges support for the DR Congo as it tackles the latest Ebola outbreak. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua, live in Nairobi. Uche Okoronkwo joins me now with your business headlines.
Thank you, Mahia. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Europe's largest economy foresees a return to pre-crisis levels in the second half of 2022. And two of South Africa's biggest private airlines to resume domestic flights as the country eases its lockdown. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Mahia.
Uche, thank you. Now, world leaders have gathered online for greater cooperation in COVID-19 vaccine research and development, as well as other infectious diseases. The UK-hosted virtual summit is expected to raise more than $7 billion to support a global alliance. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is attending and delivered a speech. He said China will continue to provide assistance to the countries, especially developing countries that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, support the World Health Organization's central role in coordinating vaccine research and development, and push forward the clinical trials, research and development of vaccines for the market as early as possible.
The Global Vaccine Summit, hosted by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, has an ambitious goal to raise $7.4 billion to immunize children in the world's poorest countries. The immunization effort looks to vaccinate children against diseases like polio, diphtheria, and malaria. The funds will be directed to the Gavi Vaccine Alliance.
So, just as the UK is the single biggest donor to the international effort to find a coronavirus vaccine, we will remain the world's leading donor to Gavi, contributing £1.65 billion over the next 5 years. I urge you to join us to fortify this life-saving alliance and inaugurate a new era of global health cooperation, which I believe is now the most essential shared endeavour of our lifetimes.
Representatives from 50 countries and 35 heads of state attended the virtual meeting. UN Chief Antonio Guterres and US President Donald Trump were among those in attendance. The chair of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, was among the leaders to give opening remarks at the summit.
As the world fights the global COVID-19 pandemic, we must not lose sight of the existing need of routine vaccination for children and adults. Before, during, and after any pandemic, the world cannot afford to take its eyes off the ball of the reality presented by preventable and infectious disease. The cost will simply be too high to pay, particularly in Africa.
The initiative also looks to help raise funds to aid in the global search for a COVID-19 vaccine. Astatal, CGTN.
And as science teams around the world are racing to develop the COVID-19 vaccine, one company is leading the way. CGTN reporter Liu Yang visited the world's largest inactive COVID-19 vaccine plant in Beijing.
All geared up, researchers are entering the world's largest inactivated COVID-19 vaccine production plant, built by China National Biotech Group. It's finished in just 2 months. National biosafety experts made sure the construction standards and the quality levels meet biosafety level 3 production requirements. Experts say with the annual capacity at Wuhan Institute of Biological Products, the two will produce more than 200 million doses of inactivated COVID-19 vaccines annually.
我们在全力的同时在推进这种国际合作。 We are now working with the WHO and 20 other countries to advance international cooperation and clinical and subsequent use of the vaccine. Next step, as required by Chinese President Xi Jinping, we will bring vaccines to the world as a global public health product.
Experts stress that in terms of effectiveness, the current inactivated vaccine, which developed with extensive testing on 7 types of animals, including monkeys, mice, and rabbits, and combined with other physical and chemical tests, all have proven their effectiveness. More than 2,000 people have participated in Phase 1 and Phase 2 clinical trials, and the data shows that the incidence and degree of adverse reactions are much lower than that of all kinds of vaccines.
After receiving the first dose of the vaccine, I had no discomfort, and my family members and relatives were also interested in joining the vaccine research.
Since the first vaccination, I've been keeping good living habits, filling in observation records, and providing standard data as required by the doctor.
With a history of more than 100 years, China National Biotech Group is the oldest biological blood products company in Asia. It supplies more than 80% of China's immunization program vaccines. The company also launched several research projects, such as the use of 20 heavy respiratory pathogens tests and the development of specific immunoglobulin for the treatment of COVID-19. Experts say there's an unprecedented race to develop COVID-19 vaccine worldwide at record speed. At the moment, more than 100 candidate vaccines are in development worldwide, 10 of which are already in clinical evaluation. The COVID-19 outbreak also serves as a reminder that the outbreak is not a matter of some people or one country, but a shared global challenge. Liu Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, Africa produces around 2% of world research output, yet the continent, as defined by the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, accounts for 15% of the global population and 25% of the global disease burden. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy looks at what is being done to support capacities for health science research across Africa.
In 2016, Africa accounted for 1.1% of global investments in research and development. Research in the continent has historically been mainly funded by the public sector. According to UNESCO, Africa had an estimated 198 researchers in all fields per million inhabitants in 2014. But infrastructure, financial and knowledge resources still present a diverse set of challenges to investment in research and development. Despite the challenges, many African doctors continue to make progress in research and development.
As people in these labs in Cambridge have mastered technologies that people in smaller facilities have not been able to master, because these technologies have dual use, research and service delivery or diagnostics, okay? And we have assembled not only bespoke technologies, but also fit-for-purpose human resources.
Doctors and researchers say there is need for data and research if Africa is to succeed in science.
When so much of data is lacking, when there is no research being conducted, and there is no randomized controlled trials being conducted on these medicines, we cannot use these kind of medicines unless they are being proven beyond doubt.
Several initiatives that seek to create opportunities and eliminate barriers towards progress are now being employed. African pharmaceutical manufacturers are increasingly developing their own products. But experts say for this to succeed, external and international funding must be availed to help sustain research and innovation systems in Africa. Many initiatives aimed at building Africa's research and development capacity are already in place. But scientists say there's need for a collaborative approach that ensures African leadership and ownership. Daniel Arap-Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has spoken on the phone with German Chancellor Angela Merkel about the coronavirus pandemic and bilateral ties. Xi Jinping said China wants to strengthen strategic cooperation with Germany and the EU, uphold multilateralism and jointly tackle global challenges. He said China will work with Germany to support the work of the World Health Organization. He also touched on China's economy, saying its trend towards stable long-term growth remains unchanged. Merkel said Germany attaches importance to the economic and social development plan made in China's 2 sessions, and she appreciated Xi Jinping's announcement that a coronavirus vaccine produced by China would be made a global public good. She said Germany is willing to strengthen exchanges with China and continue to support the WHO. Well, let's now take a look at the total tally of COVID-19 infections in Africa. The number of coronavirus infections in the region now stands at over 160,000. Over 4,600 deaths have been so far reported, and over 72,000 recoveries have also been recorded. In North Africa, over 48,000 coronavirus cases have been confirmed. According to the Africa Centers for Disease Control, Egypt is leading in the region with over 28,000 infections and over 1,000 deaths. The Egyptian government has, however, announced plans to relax some of its COVID-19 preventative measures. Meanwhile, more than 37,000 COVID-19 infections have been confirmed in West Africa. The Africa Centers for Disease Control says Nigeria has the highest coronavirus cases in the region, with over 11,000 cases reported. The Nigerian government, however, has lifted restrictions placed on religious gatherings during the coronavirus pandemic. President Muhammadu Buhari's government is urging worshippers to wear face masks, maintain social distancing, and properly wash or sanitize their hands before joining their congregations. Elsewhere in Eastern Africa, Sudan still tops the region with over 5,000 COVID-19 cases. Djibouti follows in closely with over 4,000 cases. Kenya comes in third in rank with 124 new COVID-19 infections. The country's new tally now stands at 2,340. The Kenyan government says it is developing an interim guidance for safe home care for coronavirus patients and their contacts in order to decongest hospitals and prevent them from being overwhelmed. Central Africa, on the other hand, has reported over 17,000 COVID-19 cases. Cameroon tops the region with over 6,500 cases. The country has also reported over 200 deaths and over 3,000 recoveries. And South Africa still remains the most affected country on the continent. The nation has a tally of over 37,500 infections and over 700 deaths recorded. Over 19,500 COVID-19 patients have so far recovered. President Cyril Ramaphosa's government has imposed a level 3 and level 4 lockdown in a bid to curb the further spread of the virus. But the Gauteng High Court has declared the lockdown regulations invalid and unconstitutional. Well, South Africa is one of the world's most economically divided countries. World Bank data indicates that 10% of households owned 71% of the country's wealth. As schools shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic divide has seeped further into classrooms. CGTN's Asta Tal with more.
Many young South Africans have been doing their best to keep up with their studies from home. But not all is equal. Zinzi's learning hasn't been affected that much, with internet access allowing her to participate in virtual classrooms.
It wasn't really an issue. It was more like they were really prepared, so they kind of knew it was coming. So they sent us work before we actually started.
In Tembisa Township, Futi is studying without the support of her teachers.
Since the lockdown, I feel like I didn't learn much because I was not connected online. I don't have any online activities that I'm learning with. The teachers didn't give us homeworks or questions that we need to do during this time or period. But if I don't understand something, I just leave it like that and wait for a hope that maybe schools will reopen and ask my teacher.
The discrepancies in South Africa's learning institutions are nothing new. A study carried out by the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement found that 78% of South African students could not read for meaning by the age of 9 or 10. This is compared to 64% in the North African country of Morocco.
After 25 years of freedom and liberation, the fact that you still have the economic disparities that we have, to think that my kids are able to have this kind of education because of my career, because I was able to get a university degree. So what about parents who are not able to get a university degree? So their children have to suffer because their parents don't have the salaries that the middle class in South Africa are getting.
In the meantime, Futi's father does his best to help his daughter out and help her stay on track. Astatal, CGTN.
Facebook and the International Committee of the Red Cross, together with the Red Crescent movement, have launched Africa Together, which is a 2-day show of artists, singers and comedians to combat misinformation and call for vigilance to curb the spread of COVID-19. Here is that story.
With the current spread of coronavirus across the African continent, it has been a battle for the hearts and souls as governments and partners take on the disease. In Africa, music has been an integral medium for spreading messages to the masses. But with the lockdowns, necessity became the mother of invention. Many artists went on social media platforms to continue with their trade. This has led to the continent's first virtual festival of music and comedy.
Now, music is a powerful vector, an important conduit to spread messages of hope, of solidarity, but crucial messages of prevention as well to our fellow Africans, especially the African youth, who themselves are agents of change in their communities and their societies. This is why we, the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement in Africa, are teaming up with Facebook Africa to bring to you the Africa Together Festival.
As lockdowns and other forms of restrictions continue being relaxed, the risk of misinformation that enables the spread of the disease is too real to ignore. This is what the Africa Together Festival seeks to address.
Since the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen a massive increase of usage of our platforms, Facebook and Instagram, around the world and in Africa. We have seen the power of these platforms to bring the world closer together. We really want to harness this power to ensure that there is correct information that is being disseminated, that we fight misinformation as much as possible. This is why we were very excited to collaborate with the Red Cross around this Africa Together campaign to ensure that Africans remain vigilant in this time of pandemic as the pandemic continues to spread across our continent.
The 2-day festival will kick off on June 4th. It will be hosted by French media personality Claudie Sillard and Nigerian funnyman Basket Mouth. The show will also be streamed live on Facebook.
It's not easy to be in confinement. It's very, very difficult because we need to support our families and get on with life to survive. So I don't have a lot of words to say to you because there aren't any words. But maybe I can give you a song or songs to give you strength or give you a bit of, how can I say, a bit of peace.
Des chansons pour trouver la force.
Côte d'Ivoire singers Kajim, Nash, TNT, Kape, Geek Enemy, who have previously partnered with ICRC in anti-COVID-19 campaigns, are also expected to perform amongst a host of other artists. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Coming up on the bulletin. Turkish President Erdogan hosts Libyan Prime Minister as Turkey looks to lock in gains of the Government of National Accord. And Africa CDC pledges support for the Democratic Republic of Congo as it tackles the latest Ebola outbreak.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. from our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. In the United States, demonstrations over George Floyd's death have continued across the country despite curfews. Thousands took to the streets in major cities, including Boston, Denver, and Portland. The demonstrations were mostly peaceful. Thousands of people have been arrested so far for vandalism, attacking the police, and breaking curfews. Well, let's shift our focus to the situation in Libya. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has held talks with Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj in Ankara, Turkey. The talks come amid military gains by forces allied to Libya's government of national accord, which is backed by Turkey. On Thursday, government forces announced that they have regained control of the entire Tripoli. It is not known when the talks will be held, but analysts say government military gains could hasten a truce. However, the United Nations has announced that both sides have agreed to talks. Last year, Turkey sent military equipment and personnel to Libya, which has played a big role in the recent victories for the Libyan army. Turkey has also been calling on Khalifa Haftar's backers to end their support for the Eastern Commander. To the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 2 more people have tested positive for the Ebola virus in Equator province in the western part of the country. Earlier this week, Congolese authorities confirmed tests showing that 4 people had died of Ebola in the western city of Mbandaka. Health officials say the 2 outbreaks are the same strain of the virus, which means the same vaccines can be used to help contain its spread, although they are not thought to be linked. Congo has been preparing to declare itself Ebola-free this month. The disease has killed more than 2,200 people since 2018.
WHO is continuing to respond to the new Ebola outbreak in the city of Mbandaka in the Equator province of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So far, 8 cases have been detected. 4 of those have died and other 4 are receiving care. To be clear, this outbreak is in the same area as a previous outbreak in 2018, which was stopped in just 3 months. However, it's on the other side of the country to the Ebola outbreak that WHO and partners have been fighting for almost 2 years in the provinces of North Kivu and Ituri in eastern DRC. The latest person confirmed with Ebola attended the burial of one of the first cases, but was detected in the town of Bikoro, 150 kilometers away from Bandaka. This means that 2 health zones are now affected. Today, almost 50 responders from WHO and partners arrived in Bandaka, plus 3,600 doses of Ebola vaccine and 2,000 cartridges for lab testing. The government is now sequencing the virus to see whether or not it's related to a previous outbreak.
And staying with that story, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has pledged support for the Democratic Republic as it tackles an Ebola outbreak in the country's northwest Equator province. CGTN's Girum Chala has the details from Addis Ababa.
The latest Ebola outbreak in the DRC is the 11th one in the country. The disease has spread rapidly in the city of Mbandaka, northwest of the country.
It's something that we are following up and monitoring very closely with the government. What we can say is that this area has already experienced Ebola outbreak, and people, the health workers in that area, know how to handle it.
In response, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the government of DR Congo are deploying expert health workers to the area. The African Union is also sending personal protective equipment such as masks and gloves to DRC to be used in containing the spread of Ebola.
very good news is that we have people on the ground in DRC already. So this is a big asset. Our responders for the multiple outbreaks are there in DRC, and we have even deployed some of them in Cameroon, in Niger, in Burkina Faso and Mali recently to help support the COVID-19. But we did not deploy everybody. We have some people back in DR Congo. Some of them are responding to the ongoing COVID-19 in Kinshasa, and we will mobilize and put them on standby as soon as possible to deploy them in the field also to respond to the Ebola outbreak.
The coronavirus pandemic has put a strain on Africa's health infrastructure, and the outbreak of Ebola is another huge burden. The Africa CDC has advised member states to further strengthen their respective health response efforts.
For us, as Africa CDC, we are still insisting on the necessity of building strong health systems. What do we mean by building strong health system? Is to strengthen what we call the National Public Health Institutes. And these are the specialized institutions to deal with these different outbreaks. And we are also calling the countries to strengthen their laboratory capacities.
The new Ebola outbreak in DRC, coupled with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, is already a reason for Africa CDC officials to sleep less at night and work more towards containing the outbreaks. For now, solidarity and support among member states is also seen as the way to defeat both public health challenges in Africa. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The United Nations Multi-Dimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali, also known as UNMISMA, has made a command post available to the G5 Sahel Joint Force in Bamako. The command post is the third of its kind and will enable the G5 Sahel Force to fight effectively against terrorism in the Sahel region. The handover ceremony took place in the presence of representatives of the G5 Sahel forces, the United Nations, together with the Chinese and Malian authorities. Here is CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moi with more.
The G5 Sahel command post in Bamako is estimated to cost about $1.1 million. It will consist of 6 air-conditioned buildings, each with electrical installations, 60 offices, conference rooms, an operations room, and a dormitory. The structure is also expected to be highly secure with amenities such as a security fence perimeter.
This worksite that we are inaugurating today is further proof of the international community's commitment to the G5 Sahel Joint Force. I am therefore very honored, and on behalf of all of you, because this command post is the symbol of this multilateral cooperation, to hand it over this afternoon to my General Aumara Namata, Commander of the G5 Sahel Force.
Thanks to the support of the international community and the significant efforts of the member countries of the G5 Sahel, we will now be able to solve the security situation in the region. Our battalions are fighting day and night to ensure security and stability in the region.
Members of the United Nations Security Council, including China, have expressed their strong support to the G5 Sahel countries. The Chinese ambassador to Mali says the new command will greatly contribute to anti-terrorist activities in the Sahel region.
We are confident that with our joint efforts, we will win this war. China, as a member of UNMISMA and also as a friend of Mali and the G5 Sahel countries, both multilaterally and bilaterally, has done much to help strengthen the military capacity of the 5 member states. China will also continue to strengthen our efforts to support these countries.
The United Nations is certain that the new command post will protect Bamako from possible terrorist attacks in the near future. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's take you to northern Nigeria now, where one woman is breaking the norm in the male-dominated coffin-making trade. Data from Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics shows that there are more unemployed women than men in the West African nation. Many women there are now venturing into fields they previously steered clear of. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
Famous female coffin maker Loveth Ugochukwu putting work into her craft. As a trained seamstress, nothing prepared the mother of 6 for the journey into her newfound trade. But Loveth lost everything during the sectarian violence that rocked North Central Plateau State in 2001. So her quest for survival put her on a path to a male-only craft.
I did not choose to do the work, but after the crisis, we left with nothing. So I have to do the work anyhow, at least to look for survivor, to at least to put food on my table, to take care of my children, and to do other things. When some men come here, they will say, wow, a woman doing caskets, even them as a man, they are not free entering the place. Surprise to them, seeing a woman doing the work. Even some will park with their car, looking, is it really a woman?
After her decade-long apprenticeship, Loveth Ugochukwu launched her business with a capital of about $800. Now she rakes in about $100 to $600 per casket, and she makes 2 or 3 caskets a day. Despite being successful at her trade, Loveth still meets subtle gender discrimination.
It's a lot of challenge. Being that I'm a woman, you know, sometimes you go to the Katako, buy the wood, you know, tell them what to do. They will say, you know, they will keep on questioning you. Why do you want it like this? Because maybe they say I'm a woman. But I thank God at least I can be able to overcome it.
Nearly half of Nigeria's 200 million strong population are females. A huge number of them are affected by the unemployment crisis. But Loveth is changing that narrative. With 8 employees on her payroll, she's looking to expand her business further and train more women to become self-reliant. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Plateau, Nigeria.
Well, let's shift our focus to South Africa now, where one family in Cape Town has started a pop-up street library outside their home so as to encourage reading during the lockdown. The family placed their collection of books as well as DVDs on the street so that people interested could read or watch what they'd like. CGTN's Travers Andrews tells us more.
It's called the Lazy Library, and as the name suggests, this pop-up street library has made catching up on a book or a DVD as easy as it can be. For some, it's just a mere walk down the street, and that's made this library such a popular hotspot in Cape Town's Somerset West community, where many still remain indoors. The library was founded by Carolyn Kramer and her family, who wanted to contribute meaningfully to their community during the lockdown.
During lockdown, I think we've done a bit of spring cleaning and just realized we have piles and piles of great books that we've collected over the years, and we didn't really know what to do with them, and we were going to donate them somewhere. And then we realized so many people can't access libraries at the moment, and so many people have time to read actually. And so we thought about starting a neighborhood library, which is what we've done. So we put out books 3 times a week, and just the response has been absolutely phenomenal.
And it's easy to see why. With titles such as this, it's given some a great reason to stay home. That includes the elderly, who the government continues to advise to remain indoors due to COVID-19 concerns.
A lot of elderly people in the neighborhood, and I think particularly for them this is an incredibly lonely time when you can't see your grandchildren, you can't see your friends, and if you can read a book you can go on an adventure. So this has really been a blessing to elderly people who don't necessarily have Netflix or unlimited internet.
This is a library that also requires no signing in or out of books or DVDs. There are also directions to the location written on the street, and even free hand sanitizers to comply with COVID-19 mitigation measures. Of course, this is a library fundamentally based on a system of honesty, and it's that sense of community that has made it such a big hit with residents here.
I found 3 excellent books. John Grisham's The Rainmaker, a really excellent book, and I'm still busy with the last one. So I've returned the books I finished, and I'm busy reading my last one.
Really been fantastic. It's also brought so many people in the neighbourhood who have made comments, and the one gentleman said he'd been here for 42 years and he'd never seen something like this.
For now, the move to level 3 lockdown regulations has given some more freedom of movement, and that has had a beneficial effect, as community members added their own books so that the library can broaden its literature offering. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, it's almost time to get caught up on the business. Let's now go to Uche with the latest.
Thanks, Mahia. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Europe's largest economy foresees a return to pre-crisis levels in the second half of 2022. And 2 of South Africa's biggest private airlines to resume domestic flights as the country eases its lockdown.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Let's start off with international news. Germany's economy minister Peter Altmaier says his aim is for Europe's largest economy to return to pre-crisis levels in the second half of 2022. Now, on Wednesday, Chancellor Angela Merkel's ruling coalition agreed to a bumper stimulus package amounting to $145.6 billion to speed up Germany's recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. Now, experts say this will be the biggest economic package since the Federal Republic of Germany was founded in 1949. However, there are still questions as to whether measures like VAT reductions will be enough to kickstart consumer spending, and of course if retailers will use the VAT reductions to increase their own margins.
The economy has not yet bottomed out. In the coming weeks and months, we will experience difficult moments together. There is light at the end of the tunnel, though. International economic experts, for example from the International Monetary Fund, are confident that Germany will come out of this crisis quickly, better and more powerful.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve has announced late March that it was racing to rescue the U.S. economy through an unlimited quantitative easing program, taking the Fed's monetary policy tools to the extreme. Now, the U.S. bailout could be a jackpot for short term, but it has underlying side effects and could pose future debt and market risks to other nations. Here's Michelle Vandenberg with more.
As quantitative easing lowers long-term interest rates, a low-cost financing environment can encourage blind optimism and excessive speculative behavior. Economists say this could lead to rapid expansion of debt and future inflation.
The long-term prospect is not as good because we see governments falling deeper into debt and maintaining a much more debt-fueled balance sheet, which will likely in the future lead to inflation, because obviously as governments struggle to bear that debt, they'll want to increase inflation to so that the debt becomes smaller relatively over time.
Globally, quantitative easing is likely to generate more debt and market risks in other countries, especially for emerging economies.
For emerging economies, this is very, very big because many of them have borrowed in dollars and now need to service that dollar debt. many of them have a dollar peg. So they need to make sure they get enough foreign currency reserves into their balance sheet to maintain their currency peg to the dollar. So yes, for emerging economies, the road ahead is not easy.
It is very destabilizing for the world economy more generally. And we've seen examples of this year already in March, where you had an incredible sell-off in the likes of South Africa's currency, the rand, and a massive increase in long-term interest rates in South Africa. And it's a source of grave destabilization. And it's just getting worse and worse. The cycles of boom and bust are getting shorter. And ultimately, I'm afraid that this in itself could lead to a total collapse.
The unlimited quantitative easing may lead to a quick economic recovery, but ignores the urgency of long-term and deep-seated structural problems in the U.S. economy. Economists say that the top priority for the U.S. now is to contain the spread of the coronavirus rather than giving massive stimulus. Providing relief for affected families and businesses to weather the crisis will not only help the people, but also prepare for future recovery. Michelle Vandenberg, CGTN, Beijing.
Let's move on to aviation matters now. Washington says it will suspend all Chinese passenger airlines from flying into and out of the United States. Now, officials say the move is due to the failure of China to approve American Airlines' request to resume services. It violated a bilateral travel and transport agreement, according to the U.S. The move will take effect on June 16th. Here's Yu Yang with more.
All Chinese airlines to be banned from flying into the United States in less than 2 weeks, and Washington says the decision could take effect earlier. The U.S. says the move is in response to restrictions by China on American airlines. The Trump administration claims China has prevented U.S. airlines from resuming flights between the two countries. In late January, the U.S. effectively banned entry of Chinese citizens and other foreigners who had been in China within 14 days. At that time, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the U.S. was in the single digits. In March, in order to prevent imported cases, Chinese aviation authorities announced a policy to limit international flights to China. It said starting from March 29th, foreign airlines could maintain one flight to China every week. United Airlines and Delta Airlines applied to the CAAC at the beginning of May to resume their flights. At the time, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in their country was over 1 million. Chinese authorities have not approved their requests.
The Chinese side has noticed that the relevant departments of the U.S. government require Chinese airlines to provide flight plans. China opposes any possible interference and restrictions imposed by the U.S. on regular passenger flights operated by Chinese airlines.
If the U.S. ban on Chinese flights goes ahead, 4 Chinese airlines could be affected, including Air China and China Eastern Airlines. Thousands of passengers could be affected. Youyang, CGTN.
And heading back to the continent now, 2 of South Africa's biggest private airlines will start flying between local airports this month. That's after the government eased lockdown restrictions aimed at containing the coronavirus. However, both airlines say that recovery could take at least 3 years. Airlink has started taking bookings on its website for flights from June 8th, while Sapphire Air is taking bookings for flights resuming on June 15th. Budget state airline Mango plans to resume flights on June 15th as well, but it is yet to get final approval from the Department of Public Enterprises. Now, amidst a halt on operations for around 2 months due to the coronavirus lockdown, airlines have seen their revenues fall to close to zero, while continuing to spend money on aircraft maintenance, salaries, as well as debt servicing. And still in South Africa, the tourism sector has received a further $1.7 million from the government. The sector has been hit hard by its closure amid the COVID-19 lockdown. Now, while South Africa is now moving to reopen, experts are saying it may still be a few months until tourism picks up. From Johannesburg, here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with more.
Certain areas of tourism in South Africa have reopened under Level 3 restrictions. Government has allocated additional funding to tourism guides to help them prepare.
We have set aside a total of 30 million rands, which will provide financial relief over a period of 2 to 3 months for the tourist guide. The opening up of hunting will also be a big boost to the tourism sector. The hunting industry contributes an estimated 2 billion direct spending annually to the tourism sector, and it also contributes to employment in the rural areas.
A full reopening of tourism in the country may only occur by September. Domestic flights have resumed, but only for those permitted to work and essential services.
The first phase of recovery for the sector will be driven by domestic tourism, followed by the regional tourism and international tourism. Although we will be gradually opening up the sector in the coming months, depending on how the virus is spread, we expect that the sector will only fully recover towards the end of this year.
Tourism was only supposed to open on level 1 and level 2. And for us to get some few aspects to open up on level 3, it's a positive. This helps us to build confidence, for the region and also for the international markets to see that we are ready.
Business travel is a significant contributor to the economy.
Opening up the sector further has other implications on other parts of the economy. When you open up leisure, you must also open up inter-provincial travel, right? And so that becomes key. And that's not a tourism thing, but it's a country thing about inter-provincial travel.
You can have multiple things happening at the same time to help the industry to recover. International tourists are quite important. They contribute 120 billion rand, in terms of the spend. So it's a quite important part of our sector, and we'll love to see that returning. And we know that is going to be competitive.
Government set aside $3,000 each for SMMEs in the tourism sector to help them get through the crisis. It's hoped all businesses will be able to return once the lockdown is fully lifted. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, Kenya's private sector activity inches up in May. That's after falling sharply a month before due to COVID-19. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Mahia.
Uche, thank you. Here's what's coming up in the sport. Uganda football governing body FUFA terminates the 2019-2020 season due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.